Mintadolie by Esther. Chapter 2. Acquaintances. Minty was awakened by the sound of rain the next morning as it pelted down upon her roof. She breathed a sigh and arose to make some herbal tea and rosemary bread, which she had almost every single day. She needed to get her mind off everything that was haunting her, and tried to find something to work on. Oh my, she whispered to herself. I haven't written to my sister in a long time. I wonder how she is. She sat down at once to write her a letter, while the stove baked her bread, and the sweet scent filled the house. She finished the last of her tea and bread and took her dishes into the kitchen. She swept her floor for a while, wondering if there was something she had forgotten, and then she thought of it. Oh! She exclaimed, I need to bring the package for those brothers in the meadow. She took one of her packages from the corner of the house, carefully wrapped it in a box, then grabbed her satchel and umbrella and walked out the front door, going towards where her rocky hill was. Minty could faintly see something, or someone, in the distance. It turned out to be the dark bird, though she could barely see him with the rain and fog so heavy. He was sitting atop a tree, looking into the endless, misty sky. The clouds touched the land with their soft whiteness, and she just stood where she was, looking at him as he perched like a statue above the earth. Eventually she turned away and walked back the other direction. The bird heard her as her feet rustled in the grass, and he turned his head. He didn't make a sound, and he didn't move. He just sat there in the rain, watching Minty walk back into the deep forest to deliver her letter. She gave it to a dove, who took it far over the Stonecliff Mountains. The rain began to let up into nothing but a calming mist after a while, and the clouds grew just a little thinner. The dark bird had been sitting and thinking atop his tree for quite a long time, but he soon flew away. Minty had gone back into her house, completely forgetting about Donnie and Charlie once again. Her mind was so full that her head began to hurt, so she stayed in her house for a long time. She held a cold rag to her forehead for a while, and remembered she had gone outside for some reason, but forgot why. Finally, she came to the conclusion that she should go back out into the woodlands anyway and get more fresh air. I've spent too much time inside today, she said. Walking will probably do me some good, maybe even in the meadow. She opened her door to a view of glowing light shining through the rainy mist, filling the air and sky. Her hair curled slightly in the dampness. Minty was unaware that her satchel, with the package for the boys, still hung around her shoulder. This was a most forgetful day for her. She even forgot to eat lunch, which didn't help her headache. When she reached the top of the rocky hill, the sky above looked silver, and the meadow below looked like gold. The mist gently drifted down onto the grasses, creating a thin layer of fog over the ground. She watched as two figures in the distance below started waving at her, but she couldn't exactly make out who they were, or even what they looked like. All at once, she realized that they were the two boys she had met at the gathering the night before, Donnie and Charlie, and she smiled and waved back at them. Suddenly remembering the package she had put in her satchel that morning, she quickly found her way down the rigid rock of the hill and walked out from the trees which stood at the bottom. Warbling thrushes trilled among the outskirts of the meadow, singing their own sweet, haunting melodies. Minty closed her eyes and spread her arms out into the small breeze as she listened to the soft sounds ringing into her ears. And when she opened them again, the appearance of Donnie and Charlie were clear in her sight. "Hello," she called out, waving. The afternoon light came down, shining throughout the mist and softness of the clouds, and upon Donnie's smiling face as he waved back towards her, with Charlie standing just beside him. "It's you, Miss Minty," shouted Donnie. "Thank you so much for coming. How are you?" "Oh, I'm all right," she answered, "but I completely forgot that I was going to deliver these today. Luckily, I still had them with me on my walk." "Well, I'm glad that you could see us from up there so that you'd come," said Donnie. "I'm happy you found us. I thought perhaps you couldn't see our house very well when I tried to show you last night. I'll take the package and set it inside." She gave the package to him, and he walked to his doorstep to set it inside then came back to her. "Have you gentlemen been today?" asked Minty. "Oh, just great," Donnie replied. "You wouldn't want to take a walk around the meadow, would you? It's beautiful today, perfect for a good sightseeing here." "That sounds absolutely splendid," she replied. They walked in the dreamlike scene, with the sun gleaming through the thinning fog and mist. Charlie was a quiet young lad, always seeming distracted, but it was clear that he loved to be with his brother, no matter where they went or what they did. He seemed very content. Minty was very quiet for a long time as they traveled around the beautiful grasses, leading on and seeming endless. Her gray eyes took in the reflection of the soft sunlight. Minty breathed. "I wonder what it's like outside the mountain walls." Minty was whispering so quietly that they could hardly hear her. "I'm sorry, what was that?" Donnie asked, holding his hand to his ear. "Oh, sorry," Minty apologized, feeling flustered. "I think I was talking to myself for a moment. It's strange, I'm not used to talking to other people, because at home I only talk to myself. But it's not a frequent thing I do, so don't worry, I'm not crazy." "Don't worry, I didn't think that. I talk to myself too sometimes." "Donnie," Charlie called out, "come here and look at this." What is it?" he asked, coming nearer. "I think it's an old scrap of metal," Charlie answered. "We should carry it back to the workshop, once we dig it out of the dirt." "Oh, all right. I suppose we could make some use out of it." Minty helped as they dug it out of the ground, and then together they carried the huge, rusty metal scrap toward the house. Minty hadn't actually been inside their house yet, but here they were stepping inside while Charlie dragged the rusty scrap around back to the workshop. Inside the house there was a smell of spicy cider and valerian wood, which was one of the loveliest smells of their land. Donnie poured some cider into 3 cups to set on the table, while Charlie came in through a back door, which Minty assumed was the door of the workshop. There were pottery tools, clay from the forest, various other tools for metal and woodwork, and lots of design sketches. "We'll work on that later, Charlie," said Donnie. "Let's take a break around the table and drink some cider." Thank you," said Minty happily. "It's just like the kind we drank at the gathering." "It was a wonderful party, wasn't it?" "Yes, it was indeed," said Donnie. "They're an annual event, so we come every year, and since we live right here in the meadow, we only have to walk right out our front door." "I truly didn't think I would have ever enjoyed something like that in my whole life," said Minty. "I thought it would be different. My parents used to say they would never go to a party because they were afraid, but fear just seems to get the best of us. It doesn't help us do important things." "You're quite right," Donnie agreed. "But I completely understand the hesitance to come. I think I felt that way myself a few times, not even wanting to leave my own front door." "Well, it took me years to ever step out the door and go," said Minty, "and I'm thankful I finally did." Charlie gathered some bread to bring to the table, along with a bit of deer cheese and a jar of pickled roots that had wonderful spices in them. They ate the food and drank the bubbly cider with joy. Minty looked out the window to see deer of all kinds leaping and prancing across the grass, and birds flying in the air, birds of prey, many doves, and she was almost convinced she spotted an owl flying in the midst. Owls were the most secretive creatures ever known. Some owls, of course, could become partly invisible if they chose to, but they were rare. They were often a silvery gray color and very swift in their movements. Charlie decided that he wanted to show Minty his drawings, not for the workshop, but his own creations of random things. Minty was delighted looking at them, and felt she had never seen such lovely drawing work before. "Charlie, these are beautiful," she complimented. "It's rare for me to see drawings such as this. They are new, but they look like the ancient pictures in my library." "You have a library?" he exclaimed. "Yes, I do." "You are so lucky. Mr. Murgrove is one of the only other people I know who even has a handful of old books like that. I've wanted to see what other old books are like." "I should show you my books sometime then," suggested Minty. "That would mean so much to me. Thank you so much for even having the thought of showing them to me." Minty smiled and sipped her cider. It was a lovely afternoon, and the sky began to clear when the evening light came, shining with crisp color. They all talked about the songs they had heard from other gatherings, and Minty talked of how haunting the melodies were and how much she enjoyed them. Donnie and Shelley loved them as well, and spoke of how beautiful it was in the night time. As Minty stared through the window with her wide eyes, she realized that she should be on her way home soon, before it grew too dark to see well. "Well, Mr. Donnie, Mr. Shawley," she said, "thank you so much for having me over here and for the cider and goodies. If you need any more books, just send me a letter, or ask the Doves to show you where I live. I need to go now. It was such a nice time." "Thank you for dropping by," said Donnie, while Shawley was distracted with something else. "Oh, I need to pay you for the package of books. Here we are." "Oh, thank you," said Minty. "I'd forgotten about the money for a while. And I hope you like the sketchbooks, too." She headed out into the chilly air, waving at them. "Goodbye, you two," she called. "Goodbye, Miss Minty," called out Donnie, and finally Shawley, as Donnie reminded him. "And thank you." "You're welcome," Minty called out even louder, for she was already running into the grasses of the meadow. Before she even reached the base of her rocky hill, the moon had already risen, and the sunlight was dying down significantly. Donnie and Shawley looked out the window to see her racing. "Oh, Shawley, you should open the package she gave us," said Donnie. "Here it is," said Shawley as he set it on the table. "I'll use my knife to open it up." He split it down the center and opened the sides of the box, reaching in to pull out a tied-up journal. He pulled out another package hidden near the corner of the box and opened it to find a smaller box filled with candles. "What are they?" asked Donnie as Shawley pulled them out. "Candles? Why would she give these to us?" pondered Shawley. They were both silent as they looked at the beautiful candles, some of them carved with intricate designs. "I've done so much today," Minty whispered to herself as she walked. "I just want to go back home. I barely slept last night." She again found herself underneath the trees which stood below the hill, and she paused for a moment under them, for she remembered this is where the awful bird lived. "Oh no," she whispered. "Why does that jerk of a creature have to live here? Why does he have to live where my root is? And at night time it feels so much worse." She looked up, and there was the bird's home with the bird sleeping above her. Her irritated expression turned to horror when she saw that his wings were covered with cuts, blood dripping from him onto the ground in puddles. "Oh my gosh," Minty gasped. The bird opened his right eye ever so slightly, as he was in great pain. "Who is it?" he slurred. "It's," Minty began. I'm the girl whom you stole from recently on the rocky hill, the one who came by here last night as well. It's you?" He groaned in pain even more. Minty's heart sank with an awful feeling. "I will carry you to my house, okay?" she told him at once. She moved a big rock against his tree so she could step up to reach him, and then cradled him in her arms. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll be there soon." The bird tried to talk, but he couldn't. Minty raced up her rocky hill, finding the way to her house in the forest. She was very concerned, breathing heavily, hurrying and wearing herself out while carrying the large, injured bird. At last they arrived at her house, and she hurried in through the door to set the bird on her window seat. Once she lit the lantern to light the house, it was even more apparent how serious his wounds were. "How did this happen to you?" she asked, as she took herbal remedies and soft white rags out of her cupboard. The bird slurred. "It was a rough fight. I was stealing again, and he tried to kill me. I don't know what all happened. I can't remember. I struggled to fly back home." "Just hang tight," said Minty. "You're going to be okay, understand? Now prepare yourself, because this will hurt. If I don't try to clean out the wound, it will get infected." She found and pulled out a shard of something metal, then sucked the blood with her mouth spitting into a bowl. She then poured water on it and tried as gently as she could to dab it dry. "Ow, ow," he cried in pain. "This was lodged in you," she said, holding the sharp metal. "As long as it's out now, I think you'll be okay. Your bleeding is going to stop. I'm sure of it." After washing and wiping the blood from his feathers, she applied the herbal remedy and tied clean, white bandages to his wounds. He had passed out from the pain and was lying unconscious on her window seat. "You're not going to die," she whispered, trembling. She couldn't sleep. She kept checking from time to time to make sure the injured bird was still breathing. It was now the middle of the night, and the moon made its light shine into her house. "You'll be okay," she whispered again. She laid her head down on the window seat beside him and finally fell asleep, for she was exhausted. Still in the dark of night, he woke up. Minty jerked awake suddenly in anxious anticipation. "You're okay," she gasped, with a tired and raspy voice. "I'm so sorry," said the bird, with his eyes barely open. "What for?" asked Minty. "For stealing from you." "I'm glad you finally came to your senses. I forgive you." "What is your name, anyway?" asked the bird. "I'm Minty. What's yours?" "Flop." "Flop?" Minty's eyes grew wide and surprised. "I think it's with a P and an H. Please, don't judge it." "I'm sorry, don't worry, I'm not. It's good to finally meet you, Flop. Now, go back to sleep."